Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. We made it to Friday, February 28th. We made it to the end of February. All right, I don't know. Are these celebratory moments? It's Friday. That's good. February 28th. That's good. 2025. You know, it is what it is. All right, we have to deal with it, and I guess we roll forward. Friday, a good day to clear out what has been backed up in pocket, but of course, many things piling up on top of it because it's chaos. And the weekend, of course, as you know by now, in the Trump era, is when I was going to say the serious action, but it's not very serious. The chaotic action begins. Official Washington goes home for the weekend, and I guess there's no babysitter left in the White House for Donald Trump. Not that they've been doing any particularly good job in supervising the man, but it seems like everybody goes home, or they launch all the weirdest, dumbest stuff, or he gets on social media and he issues new commands, changes the direction of the government, changes the direction of American foreign policy in the entire post-war era, whatever might occur to him during the weekend. This is kind of how it works these days. We are keeping an eye on things. I guess the long-awaited closure and cuts at the National Weather Service are now kicking in. They're closing the tsunami monitoring, the tsunami program here. What do they call it? I just saw it earlier this morning being retweeted. There we are. Tsunami.gov has its own website. But, the tsunami warning centers, 2 of them that we operate, both operated by NOAA, both being closed, employees terminated, at least for the moment, because remember, a lot of this stuff is happening. And I guess here we ought to also take our own advice and talk about things being purportedly shuttered or purportedly closed, purportedly fired, because a lot of people are suing and relatively quickly finding that at least the courts say, hey, the firing was illegal. Either it was done improperly or done by people not authorized to do it. One of the big judicial decisions over the last 24 hours or so has been finding that most of the process by which people were fired and the OPM's assumption of the authority to fire workers directly. As it turns out, I know we keep talking about it as the HR division, but maybe that's actually not a bad parallel, a bad model for understanding it, right? HR certainly deals with onboarding and I guess, do they say offboarding? I don't know. Employees, they deal with the paperwork of it and the administrative side of it, but it's not up to HR to do the firing, generally speaking. Those would be the managers of the various divisions, whatever. Each company might handle it differently, but I would think it's pretty rare that HR is the one making decisions. Why don't you guys decide who gets fired and who gets hired? They make recommendations, perhaps, about hiring, might cull through resumes. When it comes to firing, I think it's the top brass saying, all right, here now I want HR to handle the paperwork of it all. That's one thing. But for OPM for OPM to be handing out, one thing, government-wide emails declaring firings and firing policy, apparently not within the bounds of, the Administrative Procedure Act or things like that. Now, I think the order falls short of what you might be rooting for as a bystander or as one of the people caught up in this thing. There's no order that those people be allowed to report back to work and get paid for it. They just, I'm telling you, I've found that this was done improperly. What we'll do with it next, I don't know. They've sort of painted themselves into a corner, the judges have, and it would be very difficult for them to not rule that these firings are reversed, but it hasn't been done yet. So we have things to keep an eye on. And let's see, other things cropping up this morning. New York Times out with a gigantic long read thing, how Elon Musk executed his takeover of federal bureaucracy. we might want to read a little bit about that because I'd like to know. But I think we have a pretty good and pretty clear understanding of how most of it was done. New York Times, well, look, they are what they are, and they're doing some in-depth reporting at this point, but sometimes it's just catch-up. I made the decision not to bookmark and hang on to, not to pocket their rundown of the 45 individuals that they'd identified as being part of the dodgy effort, mostly because, one, the bios were mostly scraps, and two, for the people who are whose names we've called before, we know more about them than this article was telling us, and also it didn't seem like it was breaking any new ground. It's a good list to keep, and we should keep it around in case somebody does something outrageous, and we can see whether they were a named person or not, or keep some track of the roster, or is a new villain appearing. But I don't know. I mean, they're covering their bases. But New York Times seems to be lagging behind Wired, really. We've mentioned a couple of times about how out front they are in reporting things. And I think they probably have a better, I don't know, maybe the editorial board there thinks that they're less in the spotlight. I'm sure they'll end up in the spotlight. But the New York Times has been, cowed for years by the Trump administration, the first one and this one. And have bought into it for long. I know I don't go as far as some people in saying they love Donald Trump and want him to win and want him to rule us like a king, but there's a pretty good case to be made for that too. You'd be reporting a little differently. The British seem to have the handle on it. Anyway, short break for the Pucka triple mint tea, getting towards the end of that box, trying to methodically work my way through some of these things. I have now too many open boxes that have been sitting around for a while, so trying to, head straight through the stockpile in a more organized fashion, like as though I were reforming government, for instance. All right, so let's see. Where shall we start with this one? I mentioned Wired, so why don't we go straight to Wired. Their latest intriguing report about the power behind the throne, as it were, and not Elon Musk, although he too is the power behind the throne, but a different power center, but not entirely separate. As you'll see in the last couple paragraphs of this thing, I had to skim through this thing. It was being shared on Blue Sky yesterday, and people making particular note of the last couple comments and last couple paragraphs and saying, what do you think this means? You can see that they're struggling mightily to get you to read between the lines, but clearly the editors said, legal says we can't go any further than this. What is going on here? Let's read it. Wired magazine. Who's writing? See, that should be up top, I think. Or where do they display their bylines? There they are, in a weird layout. It's very, it's graphically appealing. I just can't find the name. Jake LaHut. L-A-H-U-T. Apologies if that's pronounced differently, but Elon Musk's takeover. Remember, we were just offered this story from the New York Times. What's behind it? How did he take over? This version, Elon Musk's takeover is being aided by a Trump world power couple. And there aren't that many power couples at the highest levels of this, but we hinted at the other day when we were reading, we called her name and said, oh, yeah, that's weird because isn't she married to? Oh, yeah. And here's the answer. Stephen and Katie Miller, who, by the way, I'm embarrassed to let you know that you may know her name prior to her marriage. What term are we using for that these days? I mean, the traditional one was the maiden name. Have we moved away from that terminology? Anyway, she was Katie Waldman. No relation, thank God. But at any rate, I just thought that was weird and disturbing. But now she's Katie Miller. And the word is that Stephen and Katie Miller are the power couple behind Elon Musk's takeover. He's the prime minister, as they put it here, sources say. She's Dodgy's comms guru, communications guru. And this power couple, Stephen and Katie, apparently liaise between the White House and Elon Musk and are centrally involved as he tears the government apart. There's a photo of the two of them looking very happy about tearing the government apart. And it goes like this. When President Donald Trump's aides and advisors relay concerns about Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government, they're often given what's intended to be a reassuring answer. Don't worry, Stephen and Katie Miller will take care of it. Although probably that in most minds, I think the horror dramatic music plays, but it's supposed to be reassuring, but I can assure you that it would not be reassuring to me. Number of articles, by the way, I know sitting in Pocket that remind me that this is an issue. Again, just so you can set or understand the setting here. When Trump's aides and advisors, and I would add here Republican members of Congress, et cetera, relay concerns about Musk's takeover of the federal government, we just got our asses handed to us in a series of town hall meetings. I mean, the answer to that is stop having town hall meetings, of course, or I was just destroyed on television by some Democratic answer, and the video is being circulated, whatever it is, or we just think they're overreaching. We just think the firings are actually kind of dumb. Any number of stories about that. The one we started with, tsunami warning. Well, that's big for everybody on the coasts. Actually, kind of a big deal. Reminds me also, by the way, of what are we, like 10, 15 years removed from Bobby Jindal saying that he's examined the budget and he's a super smart guy, and we have this dumb thing called volcano monitoring and we're going to get rid of it. And everybody was like, yeah, I don't really know why you didn't understand that from the name, but that's monitoring volcanoes. That's not just like looking at them on the internet. This one's going to blow up and could kill everybody in town unless we warn people about that, and we'll only be able to warn them about it if we're monitoring it. And they pretty quickly made that case. And you remember this was also about the time that he was saying, we got to stop being the stupid party. And for instance, let's get rid of volcano monitoring. And everyone was like, actually, that would be stupid. And it made sense immediately, and he stopped talking about it. But here we are now saying we have to be the super smart, giant genius brain party, not us, them, and reform government and be efficient about it. Let's get rid of another mass killer monitoring program. Well, okay, that's awfully dumb. Anyway, so now lots of Republicans are finding I'm in trouble. My constituents don't like it. They're yelling at me. They're throwing rotten tomatoes. They're throwing fresh tomatoes. They're throwing underripe tomatoes, and they hurt the most. What can we do about this? Don't worry. Stephen and Katie Miller will take care of it. Just to set the scene once again, as Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE as we call it here, task force, as this task force dismantles key parts of the government and plan to cut the workforce at federal agencies by half or more. New round of numbers out there saying that certain agencies will be reduced by 50%, 80%, right? Social Security Administration by 50%, IRS by 50%, maybe more. Worst possible choices, of course. As this is all happening, the Millers have become pivotal figures in Musk's orbit. Multiple sources tell Wired. The couple has been tasked as intermediaries. That's liaising, I guess. Bringing news about Musk's latest targets and communications strategies to the rest of the White House, say members of Trump's inner circle and people outside the administration who know them personally. Friends say Jared and Ivanka are privately appalled. And I don't know whether the friends of the Millers get appalled about anything, except the possibility that someone spit in their sushi. Just over a month into the new administration, they have been privately projecting themselves, they're doing it themselves, as two pairs of steady hands at the till. Now, Stephen Miller, as horrific as he is, at least, we know who he is. We know where he came from. We know what his background is. We know he's got access to the guy who purports to be president. He's always kind of been there. Disgusting figure in his own right, but he's always kind of been there. Katie, what makes your hands steady? I don't know. Anyway, Stephen Miller is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor these days. Two sources described his current role as that of a prime minister. His wife, Katie Miller, and that's the weird part. We mentioned that she was a big part of the DOGE dodgy inner circle the other day, and I said, that's weird. Isn't she married to... Yeah. His wife is a special government employee, supposedly, who functions as the top communications official at Dodgy. She is also on the payroll of the firm P2 Public Affairs, the Wall Street Journal reported, which has ties to Musk and several alumni of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' 2024 presidential campaign. Ordinarily the sort of thing that would get you executed these days. Although, I don't know, maybe Trump is less mad at DeSantis now that he's been, roundly defeated. But he was never in his good graces. But I guess Katie gets a pass because Stephen. So, all right. Stephen, as you will recall, was a senior advisor in Trump's first term. That we do remember, and an architect of the administration's anti-immigration platform, including advocating for the policy of separating migrant children from their families. So nice guy, right? Katie also served in the first Trump administration, that's probably where he met her, as deputy press secretary at the Department of Homeland Security during Kirstjen Nielsen's tenure. Remember her? Before ascending to the role of press secretary in 2019 and communications director in 2020 for then Vice President Mike Pence. Remember him? The Millers were married in 2020. Katie Miller, like many people associated with Dodgy, is a special government employee, or at least that's the claim, limited to working in the federal government for no more than 130 days. We should start counting that down. In any given 365-day period, and subject to less stringent ethics requirements, that's a good thing, than permanent employees. She was assigned to run communications for Musk prior to the transition, a White House official tells Wired, beginning her journey with Musk as a comms Sherpa. Of course. Anyway, now she has become the richest man in the world's guide to life in Washington, and integral to the high-velocity, high-volume barrage of cuts to the government's workforce and spending, many of them being questioned in courts as to their legality, that have come to dominate Trump's first month back in office. Her relationship with Musk, the White House official says, is central to Dodgy's interactions with the rest of the White House. She's the key intermediary, delivering the Dodgy message of the day to the rest of the administration. She's also the one to deliver any sensitive or bad news to Musk, says the official. All right, keep it in mind. The Republicans who spoke to Wired for this story all requested anonymity to discuss sensitive matters. They are all generally supportive of the Dodgy initiatives, but share varying degrees of concern about Musk harming Trump's image. We're saying so for your benefit, sir, you see. They're worried that he'll harm Trump's image, and they felt compelled to speak up out of an urge to protect the boss. Trump, meanwhile, has continued to back Musk publicly with enthusiastic praise for Dodgy's cuts, most recently with a flattering introduction before Musk held court at Wednesday's cabinet meeting. Yeah, he doesn't seem bothered by it, but, when things go south, he's not going to accept the comment of, well, you were praising or you were helping Musk or you didn't warn me about Musk, even though they did. They make the article here by saying, oh, yeah, we're expressing private concerns about Musk. Nobody told me anything, so it's not going to do you any good. But anyway, meanwhile, Stephen Miller has, along with Project 2025 co-author and Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought, become one of Musk's closest allies in the administration. The New York Times reported earlier this month, Wired has learned that the relationship is far closer. That bit about the New York Times is appended to the previous sentence. That makes more sense. Who cares what the New York Times reported that Wired said? This is Wired. What we mean here is that Miller and Russell Vought are Musk's closest allies in the administration, the Times reported, period. Wired, meanwhile, has learned that the relationship is far closer and more complicated than has been previously known publicly. All right, so now we need the dramatic music for that. We're getting to that part of the story. They never come right out and say it, but the story kind of takes a weird turn in the subtext here. So, in many ways, Musk's targeting of federal agencies is perfectly in sync with the aims of Miller, who has championed Dodgy's work internally and even helped in making a lot of it possible. Parenthetically, it says, in public, Miller has equated federal workers with, quote, radical left communists, unquote, and, quote, criminal cartels, unquote. Certainly, you can see where Elon Musk's weird phrasing of things is coming from. They're very bold and brash, you might say, if those don't carry negative connotations. They should carry more negative connotations. We'd all cringe if the New York Times were reporting it that way, but those are the words that they reach for. But they've been really outrageous in the way they've in their rhetoric, and Elon Musk may find himself in trouble for it in the near future, getting himself sued. He just had a whole incident in which he decided on targeting somebody and then decided that he would look up what he accused their daughter of working in some way being connected to USAID, which he really hates. But, his rhetoric is, USAID is a criminal organization. So this person whose daughter didn't he got the wrong person. Same name, different person. Worked in connection in some way with USAID, but not directly, as I recall. But even if it had been direct, the accusation here is, USAID is a criminal organization. Therefore, this is a crime family that this person sits at the head of. And you mean at the head of that person's household at dinner? This guy sits with his daughter, who is a different person from the one who you think works for the totally normal and legitimate government organization, USAID. Well, that's crime family. Well, anyway, this stuff comes from Miller, right? Miller equates federal workers with radical left communists. They're very unhappy about that, by the way, as it turns out, and criminal cartels. Still, sources tell Wired that Trump world is more comfortable with Musk taking the heat for recent federal cuts than the less famous and, in their view, far less telegenic Miller. And they're right about that. Yet, through their actions so far, the Millers and Musk have developed a MAGA version of the Pet Shop Boys adage from the song Opportunities, Let's Make Lots of Money. Okay, probably a lot of you remember the song. Not me. But the words are here, clearly meaningful to the author. You've got the brawn, I've got the brains. That's all of it. So what a deep cut. All right. Well, anyway, Stephen Miller's knowledge of the federal apparatus, Katie Miller's contacts on Capitol Hill, and the couple's good standing among Trump loyalists, coupled with Musk's relentless ambition and effectively infinite resources, made the scale of the dodgy government takeover possible. So we don't need to read the New York Times article, you see. Musk is not the independent actor he's often more portrayed as and taken to be, in other words, but is rather carrying out actions essentially in concert with the man to whom the president has delegated much of the day-to-day work of governance. That's Stephen Miller. Stephen is kind of the prime minister, one of the three Republicans close to Trump and familiar with the situation, tells Wired. Another Republican familiar with the dynamic also used the term PM to describe Miller, short for prime minister, not post-meridian. The implication is that Miller is carrying out the daily work of governance while Trump serves as head of state, sort of, barely, focusing on the fun parts of being president. That's certainly the case. I don't think they're fun, but he does. That's the point. The White House did not answer questions about who reports to or outranks whom. The Millers are seen inside Trump world as glorified babysitters for Musk. I was going to say for Trump, but apparently for Musk, tasked with ensuring that he stays within bounds, bad job of it so far, insofar as that's possible. He gets a lot of grace, the first Republican said of Musk. Many people aren't nervous because Stephen Miller is deeply involved. And Katie, this Republican, compared Musk to a preteen child. That certainly seems obvious. The involvement of the Millers is also one of the many reasons why Trump world sources say they now don't currently see an implosion between Trump and Musk happening anytime soon, even though, As Wired previously reported, rifts have already emerged within the president's inner circle over the centibillionaire's level of power. Still, Musk's relationship with the Millers has become a subject of great intrigue in Washington, as Dodgy continues to wreak havoc on the federal government. And here we're really starting to get those heavy hints. Little is known about how often they interact outside of work. And how the relationship grew over the late stages of the campaign into the transition. What are we saying? If you can find out anything about Stephen Miller's social life, I don't want to know the answer, says a longtime Republican operative who knows the couple personally. Oh, to put a finer point on it, Stephen and Katie are very attentive to Musk. The Republican who referred to Stephen as prime minister tells Wired. There's also only one audience which truly matters, they say. He's got a forgiving audience, the audience of one, and all of us around him. That's actually how they decide to wind this thing up. But yeah, I see what you mean. People who pointed out to me that the last couple paragraphs hint weirdly at something else going on here. No one knows how much time they spend together. No one knows whether they have a social relationship. Stephen Miller's the kind of weirdo who you don't really want to know what the relationship is. Elon Musk is constantly insisting that he stands ready to impregnate anybody who's within 15 feet of him. And thanks for coming. Pick up a vial of sperm on your way out the door. Feel free to impregnate yourself. It's a little weird. So, I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but maybe nothing. Maybe the person who was hinting at it was overreading the situation, but I don't know. I thought that was a weird one, and I think it's worth bringing the Millers back into the picture and letting everybody know exactly how integral they are to all this, and who's responsible for walking that tightrope between the two poles of Trump world at the moment, Trump himself and Elon Musk.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's get down to the rest of the business of the day. Still no way we're going to be able to cram all of this back in there. But I thought that one was interesting, always worthwhile staying on top of what Wired is reporting. Two other issues breaking out into the open in terms of, we'll call it two more obvious and corrupt abuses of power happening at the upper echelons, both involving law enforcement, at least tangentially. Let's see. So number one here on the list, we'll say, though they're in no particular order, is the reporting from Judd Legum's outlet, Popular Information. Is it a Substack? I don't know. I can never tell anymore. It looks like Substack, but lots of things do. Breaking, SEC halts fraud prosecution of Chinese national who sent Trump millions. We heard the name when it happened. We reported on him a little bit. We read other people's reporting about it a little bit when things were getting weird during the campaign. And then now the payoff. Rebecca Crosby joins Judd in the reporting byline on this one. What's going on? In December, we probably read it here, Popular Information reported that Chinese crypto entrepreneur Justin Sun, I assume it's Sun as opposed to Sun, maybe they do say Sun, I don't know, but we'll say Sun. We'll anglicize it here. Purchased $30 million in crypto tokens from World Liberty Financial. Remember them? A new venture backed by President Donald Trump and his family. Then they did their own, rug pull crypto meme coin just before the election as well. But World Liberty Financial was out there with other crypto assets, non-assets really, even earlier. And Justin Sun correctly figured out that the way to infuse cash directly into Trump's pockets in a way that he'll notice and take as a bribe, but insist to people is just a sale of services on the open market. Anybody can buy these coins. It's not my fault if Chinese crypto entrepreneurs buy them. But yeah, the biggest purchase by far, $30 million. And the way those coins and assets at the World Liberty Financial operation are structured, 90% of what you take in goes to Donald Trump. It's perhaps unlike any other crypto operation out there. And Sun saw it and gave him $30 million. So what did he get in return? Sun's purchase resulted in a cash windfall for Trump. That was the immediate effect, of course. On Wednesday, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which, as you may know, is part of the government in which Donald Trump is now president and unitary executive, allegedly. Well, on Wednesday, the SEC and Sun sent a joint letter to a federal judge asking for a stay of Sun's case. Today, the judge granted the SEC's request. Normally, they don't request such things, you see. What happens here, of course, like a settlement, there are now no parties to the case who want the investigation and prosecution, if it comes to that, to go forward. So the judge is not entirely stuck here. They could, in fact, review this thing just like with anything else, the dropping of charges against Eric Adams. They could say, I find that the interests of justice are not served here, and I don't accept the settlement. It has to be ratified, but it's a rare thing that it wouldn't be. So, I think you can see where this is going, right? $30 million direct to Trump. Trump gets a note. I didn't tell them to stop. Yeah, I did. I told somebody else to tell the SEC to drop it, and they did drop it, and they dropped it because they came to them and said, the boss wants it dropped. And then if I'm being recorded, I meant Bruce Springsteen. You know how it goes. In March of 2023, the SEC charged Sun and 3 of his companies, accusing him of marketing unregistered securities, which I guess he did, and fraudulently manipulating the secondary market for crypto tokens, or at least a crypto token. The SEC accused Sun of wash trading. I don't think I know that one. It involves buying and selling a token quickly to fraudulently manufacture artificial interest. Okay, I didn't know that had its own name, wash trading. Sun was also charged with paying celebrities, including Lindsay Lohan, Jake Paul, and Soulja Boy. You got me with Lindsay. I know that one. The other two, not so much. But he paid celebrities for endorsing his crypto without disclosing their compensation, which violates federal law. A few weeks after Trump won the 2024 presidential election, Sun publicly announced that he had become WLF's largest investor, buying $30 million of its tokens. Sun added that his company, Tron, was, quote, committed to making America great again. Sun's purchase put millions in Trump's pocket. WLF was entitled to $30 million of initial net protocol revenue and a reserve to cover operating expenses, indemnities, and obligations. Okay, I'm not even certain what all that means. After the reserve was met, a company owned by Trump, there we are, would receive 75% of the net protocol revenues. Sun's purchase covered the entire reserve. And as of December 1st, this amounted to $18 million for Trump, 75% of the revenues of all other tokens sold at the time. Sun also joined WLF as an advisor. While the purchase benefited Trump, WLF tokens are essentially worthless for Sun, as they are non-transferable and locked indefinitely. Nevertheless, Sun has invested another $45 million in WLF, bringing his total investment to $75 million. This means Sun's purchases have sent more than $50 million to Trump, Bloomberg reported. Sun has also continued to shower Trump with praise. He may value that even more. On January 22nd, Sun posted on X, quote, if I have made any money in cryptocurrency, all credit goes to President Trump. Like, sure, why not? Now the SEC seems poised to negotiate a favorable settlement with Sun or drop the case entirely. Yesterday, the SEC and Sun filed a joint request for a 60-day stay in the case against Sun to, quote, allow the parties to explore a potential resolution. Sun seems pleased. He responded to news of the request for a stay on Twitter, posting 3 handshake emojis. Very eloquent of him. Last week, Brian Armstrong, CEO of the crypto trading platform Coinbase, announced that the SEC was dismissing its lawsuit against the company. The move came after Coinbase boosted Trump's crypto meme coin, donated $75 million to a pro-Trump super PAC, and chipped in $1 million to Trump's inauguration celebration. So obviously, this very quickly becoming the open channel legalized bribe methodology that it will work to get you, out from under any investigations that might be troubling you. But of course, I'm sure charges will be dismissed without prejudice, just to keep you in line, as with Eric Adams, and in case we need to tap you for another couple mil here and there. All right, that's one of 2 actions, which again ordinarily would be 100% impeachable, 5-alarm situations for any other president. But for Trump, it's just Trump being Trump. And there's another one. And this one, reported over at the Washington Post, I don't know, let's see, is this about personal liberties or the free market? I'm not certain which one it is. At any rate, those are the only 2 subjects they're allowed to editorialize about anyway. This reported story, an exclusive, allegedly, to the Washington Post, the FBI investigating Trump EPA claims of fraud in $20 billion Biden grant fund. Now, by the way, this came to my attention a couple days ago on Blue Sky, and here I should be searching my records here. Let me see if I can figure out the search mechanism for this, because there was a very weird and unique methodology of I don't know, of trying to explain this thing, but I think I'm going to have to try and find it in another way. But I'll get to it before. I think it was Talia Lev. Maybe it was, maybe I can search for her, although I don't know her full Blue Sky handle. But at any rate, I'll look around for the post just by way of providing evidence, but I'll explain it as we go along. So, okay, I don't know that this is really a Post exclusive. I don't know why they mark it that way. Maybe there's some bit of information in there that's exclusive to them. But here's what's going on. While career prosecutors in 2 U.S. attorneys' offices and a U.S. judge balked at a court-ordered freeze, Citibank has locked down billions without explanation. That's your subheader. Okay, so that's the teaser for what's coming. Who's reporting? Spencer Hsu, Maxine Joselo, and Nicholas Rivero. Oh, Rivero. I'm sorry. Just no I in that part. Okay. Nicholas Rivero. Tell us what's going on. FBI agents. Remember them? That's Kash Patel's operation now. FBI agents this week questioned Environmental Protection Agency employees. Why? Regarding a Biden administration grant program for climate and clean energy projects, escalating a criminal probe that already caused one veteran prosecutor to resign, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. And this, I guess, is the follow-up to the story we gave some time to the other day. The prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office who resigned said that she was being pressured to open an investigation, remember? And the evidence just wasn't there. This prosecutor said, I'm going to resign rather than open the investigation. I'm being pressured to start. And at that point, it was said, oh, well, I don't know if they left the story. Well, it didn't say who was being investigated, but that it was a government agency, or maybe that it had something to do with the EPA, but it didn't say what exactly. So the larger framework here is that the Justice Department directs the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia to open an investigation into something happened, an EPA grant program that new EPA Administrator in the Trump administration, Lee Zeldin, says is, it's an obvious corrupt outlet. They took money out of the Treasury, and but just before handing over power to the Trump administration, the Bidens made a last-ditch effort to sock away $20 billion, not for themselves, but for, green energy stuff, garbage that doesn't work. And they were going to give it away with no oversight to their cronies and pals, and we're going to grab it back and not let it be spent. Except there's, as the D.C. U.S. attorneys said, there's just no evidence that that's what's going on. It looks like a normal grant to normal activist groups, and by which I mean groups that that applied for grants, made the whole application process, disclosed everything that needed to be disclosed, provided a decent enough summary for how they were going to spend the money and what the accountability mechanism was going to be, that the federal government agreed and said, here's the money. But Lee Zeldin says, no, it's going to liberals, so it's obviously corruption on its face. And the D.C. attorneys did not agree. In fact, nobody agreed except the political appointees at the top levels of the DOJ. But now that Kash Patel is in place, he's sent FBI agents across town to grill EPA employees. Confess your crimes. And apparently they have not at this point. The move came after the Justice Department in recent weeks took unusual steps to advance the investigation. That's an interesting way of putting it. Having a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney submit a warrant request when career prosecutors were unwilling and seeking prosecutors in other offices who would agree to participate in the case. People familiar with the matter said, speaking on the condition of anonymity, of course, at issue are grants totaling $20 billion under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, a program established in President Joe Biden's signature 2022 climate law. The fund seeks to leverage public and private dollars, normal, to invest in clean energy technologies, of course, such as solar panels, heat pumps, and more, including through community lenders in low-income areas. Aha! Low-income areas. We hate that in the Trump administration. The Trump-appointed EPA administrator has alleged publicly that the money was awarded with little oversight and said the agency would try to claw back the money from Citibank, which was tasked with dispersing the funds. And here is where I tell you, it's going to take a while to scroll back and find this thing. But I saw Talia Levin pointing this out, and it was very weird. But apparently Lee Zeldin's first crack at selling this as a story went something like, well, on the way out the door, the Biden administration helped Stacey Abrams. You remember Stacey Abrams running for office in statewide in Georgia and very nearly upsetting Republican favorites in those races for governor, and just had become an incredibly effective Democratic organizer in Georgia, making Georgia competitive in statewide elections. And that, of course, infuriated the Trump folks to no end. So Lee Zeldin trying to sell this story with the Biden administration and Abrams colluded to steal gold bars from the American Treasury, $20 billion in gold that they stole, and he was going to claw it back. And how could this possibly happen? Now, this was happening right in the context of Elon Musk and Donald Trump darkly hinting that they were going to make a visit to Fort Knox and hinting that they had word that the gold there had been stolen and they were going to prove that it had been taken. So there was this really weird dark connection there. And it was like off the rails crazy to say, but he had said it on some right-wing podcast somewhere. And then later on that night, Talia was saying, okay, I'm being told that this was somehow being, at some point, perhaps contextualized by saying it was a metaphor. Now, I don't know what kind of metaphor that is. It must be like the, this is not a Nazi salute, it's a Roman salute. Okay, well, this must be one of those Roman metaphors, I guess. It didn't make any sense to anybody, but they were clearly trying to connect the dark rumors circulating on, right-wing media with this issue. They could not make it an interesting or attractive issue in any other way, so they turned it into gold bars somehow. Anyway, I wouldn't let them get away with that one, even though they're now dropping it and not including it in their rhetoric anymore. I think you should be reminded, just so you can tell how crazy they were willing to go to try to sell this story. I mean, it's crazy enough in its own right, but they had the gold bars, and it's like, okay, you people are really fully insane. Well, anyway, so what was really happening, of course, was that there was this $20 billion fund, but through a perfectly legitimate program being given to perfectly legitimate actors under the normal procedure. But they figured, well, we can turn it into scandal because our MAGA troops will believe us when we say, well, first of all, it's for environmental stuff. And that means Green New Deal, and that means AOC, and we hate her. And, of course, I don't even know if Stacey Abrams is involved in any of these nonprofit organizations and grant recipients or not. But I guess even if she isn't, they'll just say she is. And she's blah, as Rick Santorum says, one of the blah people that we don't believe in. And, of course, so all of this is a huge scam because people of color are involved, or it has to do with climate change, and that's a hoax. You know how it goes. The administration ran into its first roadblock in that effort last week when a senior career prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. resigned rather than carry out the administration's demand to freeze the funds over possible wire fraud. What's the fraud? I don't know. Just do it. But the investigation did not end there, according to people familiar with the matter. Interim U.S. Attorney Ed Martin then personally submitted a seizure warrant application without any other prosecutors in his office that was rejected, on top of all this, by the U.S. Magistrate Judge in D.C., who found that the request and accompanying FBI agent affidavit failed to establish a reasonable belief that a crime occurred, 3 of the people said. This is them just trying to bludgeon it through the court. If we say it's a crime, just like Elon Musk and Stephen Miller say, being involved in USAID, even if you weren't involved in USAID, but being involved in USAID is on its face a crime. It's crazy to say that, but they say it all the time. Lee Zeldin, if you're involved in Green New Deal, it's a crime. It's not a crime. Well, the interim U.S. attorney says it's a crime. Yeah, but under what circumstances? First of all, it's still not a crime, but you asked a career prosecutor to file the paperwork saying that it was one. She resigned rather than do it. None of the career attorneys in your office would do it. None of the career attorneys in the other U.S. attorney's office you asked to please step in and do this would do it. So you ended up doing it yourself. Fine. Now there's paperwork that claims that what's going on here is a crime. Take it to a judge to get a warrant, and the judges that will usually grant anybody a warrant under any circumstances, because these things are usually presumed to be on the up and up, and now you can no longer assume that. But we're being reminded that, yeah, magistrate judges do, in fact, sometimes reject demands to, either to issue arrest warrants or, in this case, freeze funds in a bank account. You have to come to me with actual evidence. If you don't do it, your signature on the paper is not enough just because you are interim U.S. attorney. Even if you were permanent U.S. attorney, I would say your signature, what am I going to do with that? I need evidence, like bare minimum evidence. You need to give me reasonable belief that a crime occurred, and you failed to do so. That's actually fairly significant. Meanwhile, acting Deputy Attorney General, why not use that sound effect again? And you'll remember, who is the acting Deputy Attorney General? It's Emil Bove. And Emil Bove's office approached at least one other U.S. Attorney's office in the southeastern United States to launch a grand jury investigation and seek a court-ordered bank freeze, but prosecutors in that office again refused the warrant request. Two of the people said it is not clear whether more evidence has since been obtained or if a warrant was granted elsewhere, but at least 3 groups that had been awarded money said their accounts have been frozen and the bank won't tell them why. It's sounding more and more like it wasn't because of any paperwork from the DOJ, but that the banks just said, we're afraid that we'll be targeted for other things by Trump if we don't comply, so let's voluntarily freeze these funds. Stefan, or Stephen, depending on how you pronounce it, but S-T-F-A-N, Stefan D. Casella, a former federal prosecutor whose writings on asset forfeiture and money laundering are widely used by judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys, said the moves were atypical. It's certainly unusual for any case to involve 2 different U.S. attorneys' offices, both declining a case for lack of probable cause, and to have the Department of Justice continue to shop it, right? I mean, it's just unusual for anybody to find that, well, they lack probable cause. It's just one of those things that the U.S. attorneys are known, they're used to, we got to sew this up. And probable cause is not a high barrier, right? It's not beyond a reasonable doubt that you need to convict. It's probable cause. I think there's reason to believe a crime has been committed at least. And here they're like, I don't even know what the crime would be called. What is it? What's wrong? What do you think has happened here? And no one can come up with anything. I mean, I guess Emil Bove and Ed Martin say, yeah, fraud. Well, why? In what way? You're fired if you don't see it. That's essentially what's going on. So that would be pretty weird for it to happen in one office, for it to have worked its way through 2 U.S. attorneys' offices, 2 different offices, and everybody says, I'll resign before I do this. And they do. And then they send the paperwork anyway, and at least one magistrate judge says, no, they're right. There's nothing to this. And for the DOJ to say, well, we'll just find a different guy then. Well, that's very unusual, Stefan Casella says. And certainly it would be unusual to continue to shop it after a judge turned it down, he said. You can't seize a truck. You can't seize a backpack. You can't even seize a pair of socks without probable cause. And they're just not able to put together a document that looks like probable cause to anybody. The DOJ-initiated FBI investigative activity was confirmed by one person briefed on the matter and a second with direct knowledge. So again, another aspect of what's going on here is 2 U.S. attorneys' offices full of professionals said no. A magistrate judge said, no, you still have nothing here. But Kash Patel said, I'm going to send FBI agents to question people at the EPA anyway, regardless of this prima facie evidence that this is so weak, such a there's no there case. Doesn't matter. I want to harass people, and I'm going to use the FBI to do it from here in Las Vegas, apparently. So one person familiar with things said agents sought information regarding spending under the 2 components of the Biden Green Bank grant initiative, the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator programs, which seek to finance clean technology and clean energy projects. Citibank, which holds the accounts for the programs, declined to comment for this article, as did the FBI's Washington field office. A Justice Department spokesman said, per our usual policy, the department declines to confirm or deny the existence of an ongoing investigation, which is a lie. They confirm those things all the time. An EPA spokesman repeated Department Administrator Lee Zeldin's allegations. When we learned about the Biden administration's scheme to quickly park $20 billion outside the agency, we suspected that some organizations were created out of thin air just to take advantage of this, the spokesperson said. No evidence for that, of course. Looked like a normal grant situation because it was a normal grant situation from beginning to end. As we continue to learn more about where some of this money went, Citibank, it is even more apparent how far-reaching and widely accepted this waste and abuse has been. Interesting that they left the word fraud out of that phrasing. The events began to unfold February 12th when Zeldin said the agency would try to claw back the $20 billion and terminate its contract with Citibank for dispersing the funds. Zeldin claimed the Biden administration had awarded the money in, quote, a rush job with reduced oversight, unquote, although he did not provide any specific evidence of abuses. The EPA chief cited a secretly recorded video from Project Veritas. Everyone can trust Project Veritas. That guy was facing federal charges up until Trump pardoned him, so that's always a little weird. That, of course, the right-wing group known for its undercover sting operations, which don't work, in which an EPA official said the Biden administration was, quote, according to their probably manipulated video, trying to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in, the Trump people come in, and stop it all. It truly feels like we're on the Titanic and throwing like gold bars off the edge. So it may have been that person's phrasing. That was the metaphor. But Lee Zeldin apparently told the right-wing podcasters that it was literally the case that gold bars were being thrown off the edge of the ship here, but then said, no, I was referring to the guy on the video. I get it. I see how that could happen. About a week later, on February 18th, the head of the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. resigned after declining to order Citibank to freeze the accounts. This was Denise Chung, who wrote in her resignation letter that the criminal investigation sought by Bove and Martin was unfounded. And, those are the sorts of investigations we don't pursue, because that's not the way law works. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We continue with the reading of this Washington Post piece about Lee Zeldin's shenanigans at EPA, in which he's trying to leverage both Kash Patel at the FBI and Pam Bondi and others, and Emil Bove over at the DOJ to, capitalize on the atmosphere of the reign of terror here and try to convince people that a huge crime that didn't exist was in fact committed by the evil Biden crime family. Like, I thought we were done with this stuff, but no. So, wow, what an overreach by at least 1, 2, 3, 4 different organizations, agencies, and departments inside of the Trump administration. There's more to it. Denise Chung, of course, the name of the U.S. Attorney's Office, or the Deputy U.S. Attorney in D.C., who resigned rather than allow herself to be pressured into filing these charges. And it wouldn't have made any difference, of course, had she allowed it, as it turns out, because the U.S. magistrate judge to whom Ed Martin brought it in her stead said, this isn't, are you sure you understand how these papers work? You're supposed to provide me with evidence that will help me believe that a crime was probably committed here. You don't have to prove the crime, but you'll have to name one and give me some reason to believe that someone committed it. And you've failed, and that's really pretty remarkable. That's a very rare occurrence. Anyway, Denise Chung, in writing her resignation letter, added that Martin overruled her judgment that there was insufficient evidence of a crime to order this bank freeze. Chung wrote that, and it's not Stephen Chung, It's a little confusing to me, but Denise Chung wrote that Beauvais' office and Martin pressed her to act on President's Day, February 17th, which was, by the way, a federal and banking holiday, which, I don't know, I assume that they thought that people would have their eyes off, maybe, of the activity both in the courts, because they were closed, and the banks. Citibank was where they were looking to seize or freeze this money. And I guess they thought they might leverage what Elon Musk considers to be his quote-unquote superpower, the willingness to work on weekends and holidays. A government effort to essentially seize billions of dollars in grants awarded by the government by preventing their release is an extraordinary and probably unprecedented thing, whether done voluntarily by the bank at government request or ordered through a court-approved seizure warrant, said Casella, the asset forfeiture and money laundering expert. A freeze on all the green grant funds would eclipse by far the U.S. government's largest confirmed financial seizure ever when it froze stolen Bitcoin worth more than $4 billion in 2022. While it's not unusual for the FBI or EPA's internal watchdog agency to investigate the spending of taxpayer dollars, ordering a bank to freeze accounts without adequate evidence or legal basis would be a misuse of the Justice Department's powers of criminal investigation, he said. In other words, it would be the weaponization of the Department of Justice. To seize bank accounts without probable cause would be illegal and unconstitutional, of course, because you might recall that the probable cause standard is actually enshrined in the Constitution. Warrants are not to issue without probable cause, in fact. That's why prosecutors in D.C. responsibly refused to do it. That does not mean, he said, that they didn't turn up new evidence at some point later on, and a warrant might be appropriate, but we don't know that. 3 grant recipient organizations told the Washington Post that they have been unable to draw funds from their Citibank accounts in the past 2 weeks with no explanation from the bank or the EPA, affecting their ability to pay workers and expenses. Right? So, it could be that they came up with evidence that we don't know about and convinced a different magistrate judge to go ahead with the freeze, or it could be just Citibank saying, if we don't voluntarily freeze it, Trump will threaten us with something, threaten to revoke our licenses or abilities to operate, or threaten our attorneys by pulling security clearances from partners at the firms that represent us, like we were finding out was the case with Covington Burling attorneys because they agreed to take Jack Smith's representation on pro bono, that sort of thing. No one knows what to expect. A spokeswoman for the Climate United Fund, a coalition of nonprofit groups that received the largest grant award, nearly $7 billion, it's an awful lot, said its account has been frozen since February 18th, the day Chung's resignation became public. She said the organization hasn't received a response to several letters and is considering all of its options. Spokespeople for the Coalition for Green Capital and Justice Climate Fund, which received $5 billion and $940 million, respectively, said they had received no explanation about why their accounts were frozen. Justice Climate Fund claimed its account was frozen on February 14th, the Friday before Chung resigned. The 3 groups are among 8 grant recipients to whom the EPA had awarded $20 billion to invest in tens of thousands of projects to fight climate change and promote environmental justice. And that's the problem. It has the word justice in it, environmental justice. So therefore, it's DEI and something we want to put a stop to. Federal asset seizure and forfeiture actions with banks typically unfold in several stages. U.S. prosecutors can covertly investigate the matter, requesting information from a bank, usually with a subpoena from a grand jury. To freeze or seize a bank account, however, they need a warrant issued by a judge, because otherwise it's just a taking, right? Under limited emergency circumstances, they can ask a bank to freeze an account temporarily while a seizure warrant is sought under seal, but they still need probable cause. Finally, the government can go forward with a publicly filed charge or a criminal or civil forfeiture action. Any warrant or court-ordered freeze requires probable cause and notice to the account owner in 60 days, Casella said. For liability reasons, a bank usually is eager to explain if its action against the customer is at government order. When the customer says, "Where's my money? Why did you freeze it?" they usually will say, "I'm sorry, but the government ordered us to do it. We got a warrant," or they explain that a warrant was immediately pending. Absent such notice, it is up to the account holder to challenge the action in court if it wants answers or its money, and they do. In her letter, Chung said she and the FBI Washington field office agreed that it could write to the bank recommending a 30-day administrative freeze on the assets, but not compel it as part of a criminal investigation. Chung said she wrote to the FBI that her office believed there may be, quote, potential violations of a federal wire fraud statute and conspiracy statutes meriting additional investigation, but that the probable cause standard for ordering a freeze had not yet been met. Meanwhile, the former EPA official in the Project Veritas video, Brent Efron, was contacted last week by the EPA's Inspector General's office. There is one, huh? And on Monday by an FBI agent from Washington at the request of Miami federal prosecutor Joshua Pastor, deputy chief of an asset forfeiture unit within the Southern District of Florida, according to a person familiar with the matter. So, like we found out, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office couldn't find anybody that would submit this paperwork. I don't know whether they went to the Southern District of New York next to try and find that, or whether they went down to Atlanta or where to try to find somebody else. But there was a second U.S. Attorney's Office that also likewise declined to have anything to do with it. And then they said, Attorney General Pam Bondi, where can we go to find a friendly audience to get a U.S. attorney who will do this work? And she may have said, you know what? Florida, where I used to be Attorney General, there's a Attorney General, or there's a U.S. attorney that we installed who's still in office down in Miami who would be willing to help us out. Apparently Joshua Pastor is that guy, deputy chief of the asset forfeiture unit for the Southern District of Florida. The Miami office is at least the third U.S. Attorney's Office to ask to take part in the investigation. It was not clear if Pastor would remain on the case, the person said. Spokespeople for the U.S. Attorney's offices in D.C. and Miami declined to comment. Efron's lawyer, Mark Zaid, who also has been targeted by the Trump administration with sanctions and had his security clearance pulled, etc., which makes it difficult to represent some of these clients. Efron's lawyer, Zaid, said in an interview that his client, quote, doesn't know what this is about, and that he was never involved in the obligation or disbursement of funds from any EPA assistance program, including NCIF and CCIA, both held at Citibank, and he was not involved in any conversations about CPA and Citibank. Testifying Wednesday before a House Energy and Commerce Oversight Subcommittee, EPA Acting Administrator, another acting, all right, Acting Inspector General Nicole N. Murley. Acting EPA Inspector General. Aha. I was wondering, but didn't they fire the Inspector General there? Yes, they did. And the person filling that role while they decide what to do with it is Nicole Murley. And she said her office was also reviewing spending under the law that created the grant program, adding that EPA's push to meet statutory deadlines raised concerns over the proper vetting of grant recipients, proposed projects, and monitoring of funds. Murley's office has jurisdiction to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse at the EPA, including potential violations of federal fraud, theft, and money laundering laws, and is typically the entity to investigate the agency's own spending. Conservative groups with ties to the fossil fuel and mining industries praised the EPA's actions. We love that they took legal action without probable cause. The Biden administration intended to use a large part of that $20 billion to fund leftist activist groups, said Myron Ebell, a former Trump EPA transition advisor who chairs the American Lands Council, which seeks the transfer of federal lands to states so that they can transfer them to private entities, and who has called for repealing the central scientific finding for U.S. action against climate change, in case you were wondering what kind of person this is. Martin, the U.S. attorney in D.C., also posted about the Climate United Fund before taking office, saying in October, ready for this one, what he posted on Twitter? Insanity, $6.7 billion given to green activists by Biden to disperse to others. Total graft. Needs to be stopped. Elon Musk better look into this one as Dodgy King. And so it has come to fruition. After Zeldin's announcement this month, the U.S. Dodgy Service, a group billionaire Elon Musk oversees, wink, wink, no he doesn't, yes he does, that aims to slash the size of the federal government, praised him on Twitter for an, quote, awesome job on saving taxpayer money. So this setup has been in the works for some time, only now coming to fruition with another raft of resignations of career professionals who said, I'd rather resign my job and go looking in this economy than be involved in this farce. I mean, not even rising to the level of probable cause that a crime has been committed. That's really rather remarkable, let's say. All right. How about we do this? I've got a piece. Let's roll back a ways and pull back for just a second and take a local focus. We'll look back at our good friends in Michigan. Rosalyn MacGregor is here again with a piece that she submitted at the end of last week, and I wasn't able to shoehorn in on Friday. We're back on Friday again. Always a good day for a recorded segment or two. And let's see what's going on. A local effect of the Trump earthquake in Michigan. Not a shock, not a surprise, I guess, any of it here, but just a good revelation about what people are thinking. And I'll bet they're thinking it all over the place. But the fact that they're thinking it in Michigan in particular is significant, as you will see. What's new in Michigan, Rosalyn?
Good morning, David.
Good morning.
Today's installment is about Michiganders' actions to maintain economic and reproductive control over their lives following Trump's election. The Michigan Advance had this article from Anna Liz Nichols for Valentine's Day. A surge of patients in Michigan are considering new contraceptive options following the election, according to physicians in the state. It's a rare day that has gone by since the election without a patient inquiring about their birth control options, rurally Michigan-based OBGYN Melissa Bain said. Many of the patients who are calling into our office are already on some form of birth control, but are interested in new, more long-term options that will last through Trump's administration. And we've been getting a lot of requests for sterilization, Bain said. I did more sterilization requests in the 3 months post-Dobbs than I had done in probably 15 years. Concerns over further rollbacks on reproductive health care have been common in the hundreds more patients in Michigan who have made appointments for long-acting forms of birth control like IUDs each month since the election, Planned Parenthood of Michigan reports. In fact, in the 2 weeks following Election Day, Planned Parenthood of Michigan reports that appointments for long-term birth control like IUDs and arm implants went up 77% compared to the same time the year before. And each week since, there's been about 40% more appointments than there were before the election, with patients concerned that the Trump administration would roll back access to contraception or institute a nationwide abortion ban. Nationally, Planned Parenthood reports that on the day after the election, Planned Parenthood health centers saw a 1,200% increase in scheduling for vasectomy appointments and a 760% increase in IUD appointments. Bain said that even in states like Michigan, where the right to an abortion and reproductive health care is in the state's constitution, there's still a lot of fear surrounding unwanted pregnancies or not being able to access life-saving care related to pregnancy. Even without a federal ban on abortion, Bain said any changes in Medicare or Medicaid would have wide impact on the patients she sees. Several studies show that regret for sterilization goes down for women starting at 30 years old, but Bain notes that it's not very high to begin with. Other surgeries, like knee replacements, have higher regret rates. What started as an attempt to fight back against stigma around sterilization turned into a national debate when Michigan State Rep. Lori Pohutsky, Democrat of Livonia, shared at a rally outside the state capitol that she had undergone surgery to permanently make herself sterile. Navigating pregnancy in Trump's America was not an option for her, Pohutsky told the crowd, a statement that was highly criticized by many conservative figures, including Ben Shapiro. Pohutsky said, quote, "We're getting some death threats, which was not really what I expected to happen. I find it really, really weird that anyone has personal feelings about what choice I ultimately made about my own body and my procreative future. There have been very polarized reactions about it, and I think what's going to start becoming more common to have conversations around it. That was what I was hoping for, to remove some stigma," unquote. The conversations around her desire to end any possibility of getting pregnant were long and not easy conversations to have, Pohutsky said. It's common for women to second-guess themselves, and she's glad to hear that in sharing her story, others have reached out to share that they've also gone through the process, or hearing her story made them feel less alone as they considered sterilization. Pohutsky was among the masses that got an IUD in response to the 2016 presidential election, but she shared that regardless of how the 2024 election played out, she was already educating herself on sterilization as a possibility, but Trump's victory prompted her to set a date to have the procedure while it was still available. Quote, "I think that you can be at peace with the decision that you make, but sort of mourn the closing of a chapter. That was a definite part of my life that I decided I was done with when I went for the surgery," Pohutsky said. "I think ultimately I would have ended up having the surgery. That was something that we had sort of settled on, but there was a sense of urgency. The need to do it now, I think, was solely because of how the election went, and there was a part of me that resents that anyone has to make a decision based on somebody else's personal preferences around their body," unquote. Back to you, David.
Whoops, there we go. All right, I'm fighting with the mute button on that one, but thank you very much, Rosalyn. That's, like I said, not a shock or a surprise, but the interest in it, well, one, Michigan, and always an interest there because of the reports you've been providing us all along. But as you pointed out, yeah, the reproductive rights are supposedly, and I think they are, fairly stably, I guess, protected by constitutional right in Michigan, but, you know, that's subject to change. We now found out that the United States Constitution can be ignored, turned upside down, read through squinty eyes to say whatever the Supreme Court says. Well, that can happen in Michigan as well, with or without a compliant Supreme Court. A Republican governor could just say, we're going to make it difficult in other ways, or, you know, and I think it's just prudent thinking, and probably is happening in a lot of states, regardless of the state of the Constitution there. People saying, yeah, I really can't afford to leave reproductive decisions to chance any further. And really rather remarkable and an important update in that respect. All right, I know it was a shift in gears, but A, I wanted to get it out there, and B, I could use the break. That was very helpful. Thank you very much, Rosalyn. And to all of you who from time to time will submit your recorded suggestions about the direction we ought to be going, stories that ought to be covered. That's one of the things that we offer you here, right? It's we program our own show here, and it could be stream of consciousness on any given day, every single day, as a matter of fact. But what about what's in your stream of consciousness? Whether it's connected to something we've discussed, or is something that you think we have given short shrift to, perhaps ignored, maybe just weren't aware of. I'm sure at some point you've sat there and said, what about this story, that story, or the other one? And you can do it in a number of ways, and we will always, of course, accept your suggestions for stories to read and talk about. In fact, Rosalyn followed up by sending us another suggestion that we may or may not be able to get to at some point, but that you're all free to do, and you know how to do it. use my wacko online name that I should probably go back to, making it a little bit less simple to identify exactly, who's making all of these statements. I did experiment recently with a different profile photo avatar, if people are still using that terminology, on Blue Sky. But everybody's so familiar with the old headshot, and it's way old, the headshot. I'm grayer than that now. But it was a nice picture, and it served the purposes nicely. And every time I try to use a new picture, it doesn't center right. It's very screwy. So that's a reliable old picture. But that, and maybe, I got into the practice of using the real name in the identifier, even though I was using the KagroX as the handle, as it were. Anyway, we still use that for email purposes, and you know how to find us. And maybe we should be switching out of Gmail too, now that the major tech companies are knuckling under to Trump. But at any rate, for the time being, it's kagrox@gmail.com, where you can send your story suggestions, whether that's a link to a story that you think deserves airtime, or if you really get ambitious, record the thing. Record yourself reading us the article. Save me the time and trouble, but also add your own commentary if you think it's worth doing. You have some angle on the story that isn't getting covered by the reporter's take. Feel free. We try to keep the segments to a couple of minutes so that it's manageable and we can cram in more stories around it. But go ahead and do it. Almost any smartphone will do. And if you got a nice setup at home with a microphone and recording device on your computer that you can do a little sweetening of your voice if you like, or editing if you feel like you made a mistake. And don't worry about it, by the way. Most of the time when we get recordings like this, just as with my live reads, there are stumbles and ums and ahs or whatever. And I try my best to review it and edit it and clean it up so that you sound your best when you get on the air. So don't worry about that. Don't let that stop you. So thanks to all the people who have done that in the past. And while we're thanking people, I might as well point out that there are a couple more who have joined us in supporting the show, either by boosting their already existing monthly contributions, as T. Wilson did back on the 7th of February, or becoming a new underwriter, as it were, on PayPal, as John Weber did on the 11th. I think actually this goes way back. I think I just recently actually discovered this was an oversight from December, if I have noted this correctly. John Weber and PayPal. And then over on Patreon, Ryan Stone, a new supporter who joined us just the other day on the 26th. Thank you all. And thank you all who continue with your support. It makes it possible to save face here at home, saying, yes, I waste a significant portion of my day on this experiment in which I speak into the microphone and no one here in the house can see who I'm talking to. We're able to point to the Patreon accounts and the PayPal accounts and say, all right, well, it doesn't exactly cover the mortgage or anything, but you see there are people out there who appreciate it, right? Okay, and there are a fairly large number of them, so I guess it makes it all worth it. And we appreciate the opportunity also to be able to call out and thank you in person, sort of, so to speak, when you do join us through that mechanism. And some of you, by the way, interested in offering support. I did get a note that I really need to figure out a way to respond to from somebody who said, I guess, uncomfortable with the various online options, and who can blame you? Giving out your information to an online payments provider these days is worrisome. Most of them are owned by Elon Musk or influenced by Elon Musk. Maybe it's information he could steal at some point. We're all subject to that worry, of course. But yeah, to date, I just have not got any other way to accept. I can, of course, accept payments via United States Postal Service as long as they don't eliminate that. But the question was, what about a check? Can I send you a check? One of the problems with it is I don't have anywhere for you to send it but my home address, and that too worries me a little bit. So we'll see if we can find some alternatives that other people are already using. They won't have to provide anyone new with any payment information. But, not everybody's up to speed on making electronic payment transfers these days. But that still remains our best option. Okay, so we head into our last segment following a break that will take, in about a minute or so. 2 minutes to regroup and decide what will be the next topic of discussion. And there are many hundreds of them available. Let's see. You know what? One of them I parked the other day would probably make a relatively good short plug, but now of course, one, I can't find it immediately, so that it makes it difficult to try and figure out a way to cram it in, and it's not going to happen now. But something you need to know, I don't know how substantial the reporting on it is and what the backup is, but something that you ought to know. At play in the background that Scott sent along, I'll add it to the mix after this 2-minute break. You got 2 minutes to think about how dumb it might be. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, finally, yes, all right, we're back. Thanks for hanging in there. We've made our way back to the program here. Continuing battle. When I have one eye on something else, and I think I'm unmuting the thing. I mean, the button is the button, but I don't know. You got to give it a good, solid, square push, or you end up just making noise. Okay, what are we going to do here? I mentioned to you on our way out the door for the break that I had something. I don't know what to make of this thing. I do not recognize this source. This is something that Scott sent along to me, but I had seen a similar claim, the same claim, being made, and I didn't track it down because I didn't know what to make of it, and I didn't know what good it was going to do me. It may have been the same source. It may have been a secondary source. It would be nice if it was a secondary source, so we could have said, all right, well, multiple people are reporting this. But here's the source of this, I don't know what, piece of information. Byline Times. I don't know what that is. BylineTimes.com. Is it also a Substack? I don't know. Looks kind of like it. But it's going a little over the top with the claims. It might as well say, the Byline Times. You can trust us. We've said so. That's the tagline. That could be. It's the actual tagline is Byline Times. What the papers don't say. All right, should be of interest. That's what this program is about, what the papers don't say. But it also tells us, let's see, over in the corner here, free from fear or favor, which it spells in the anglicized, in the Anglo version, F-A-V-O-U-R. It's also free from flavor as well, which is also spelled funny. No tracking, no cookies, it alleges here. I don't know whether that's actually the case. So, they're kind of going over the top like, you can trust us. Wink, wink. I don't know what to make of this, but so I can't vouch for the source, but it's here and it's saying this: Donald Trump was recruited by the KGB under codename Krasnov, Krasnov, claims former Soviet spy chief. Now, this is not in isolation. It's been alleged before. I've seen it alleged that Trump was, as early as the 1980s, was being courted, invited to then still Soviet Russia, still with the idea, or even then, with the idea of building a Trump Tower, Trump Hotel in Moscow at some point. And this has been said before, and this might be a rehash of it. It might be new information pertaining to it. I'm not entirely certain. Like I said, can't vouch for it. And the main takeaway is, for me, the main takeaway for bringing it to your attention is, well, one, in case you've never heard it mentioned on the program before, and it's possible we've kind of ignored it because what do I need this evidence? I mean, there's pretty clear evidence that Trump is in Russia's sway even without this, but it gets mentioned from time to time that the relationship between Russia and Trump may, in fact, be much older than most people think, I guess. And two, there's the shorthand thing. Well, he had a code name, Krasnov. So we'll see that from time to time. I've seen already people have mocked up, MAGA-style hats with the word Krasnov on it. And I don't know, it might end up becoming shorthand for a wink, wink, nudge, nudge description of this recruiting effort that has been alleged a number of times in the past. A former senior KGB chief, the subheader claims that Trump was recruited by them in 1987 due to his role as a prominent U.S. businessman. And apparently that was a espionage tactic of the day. I think I've seen an even earlier date stamp on it, even as early as 1983 via Ivana and her Eastern European connections. She's, of course, Czech originally? I don't know. Anyway, the writers here, likewise, I'm unfamiliar with, Nafiz Ahmed and Zarina Zabriskie, but those are the names associated with the piece. Let's see what it has to say for it. And one more pitch for them being like, oh, we're so independent. And yeah, they are an independent, allegedly reader-funded investigative newspaper outside the system of the established press, reporting on what the papers don't say without fear or favor. We, of course, report on what the papers don't say all the time, though we're very fearful. And we have favor as well. So if you're looking for someone without fear or favor, I guess these guys say it's them. Anyway, a former senior Soviet KGB spy chief, has claimed that Donald Trump was recruited as a spy by Russian intelligence as early as 38 years ago by his department and given the code name Krasnov. Russia's Committee for State Security, abbreviated as KGB, was the main security agency of the Soviet Union between 1954 and 1991, responsible for internal security, foreign intelligence, counterintelligence, and secret police functions. In an extraordinary post on Facebook, where I wouldn't trust anything, on February 20th, Alnur Musayev, who, it says here, used to run the successor to the Soviet-era KGB in Kazakhstan, claimed that he was personally aware of Trump's recruitment by the agency in 1987. The recruitment, he said, was undertaken by his own KGB department. One of the key roles of that department was to acquire intelligence through business leaders in Western countries. In 1987, I served in the 6th Directorate of the KGB of the USSR in Moscow. The most important area of work of the 6th Directorate, 6th, as the ordinal 6th Directorate, was the recruitment of businessmen from capitalist countries, wrote Musayev in a Russian-language post on Facebook. It was that year that our office recruited 40-year-old businessman from the United States, Donald Trump, under the pseudonym Krasnov. I don't know whether Trump was actually aware of that or not. I mean, the code name, that is. He later added, in the activity of intelligence agencies, as in life, everything is possible, even the wildest and incredible things. For example, recruitment of future leaders of state and even the president of the United States. I'm sure they weren't expecting that, but there you have it. Musayev's most recent senior intelligence position was as head of Kazakhstan's National Security Committee, the KNB, under the tenure of President, oh my God, why did I even start this? Kazakhstan's leader, President Nursultan Nazarbayev. Maybe. From May of 1997 to September of 1998. Not a long tenure. He returned for a second term from August of 1999 to May of 2001. Prior to that, however, he was a long-serving KGB officer. In 2007, he fled the country after accusing the government of widespread corruption, in the form of accepting millions of dollars in bribes from Western oil giants. Exiled to Austria in 2008, he survived an attempted kidnapping, which he attributed to the Kazakhstan government. Byline Times can confirm, for whatever it's worth, based on Russian archive newspaper materials, that Musayev first joined active military service in the KGB for the Soviet Union in 1979. He then joined KGB counterintelligence of the Kazakh Special Services from 1986 to 89, the period in which he said he was aware of Trump's KGB recruitment. He was seconded somehow to the Central Office of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the USSR in Moscow before returning to the KGB. I see. The Russian language sources on Musayev's KGB career are unclear on which directorate he was involved in, although his Facebook post said he worked for the 6th Directorate. He has also been described as working for the 8th Main Directorate of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the USSR. Public information on these directorates and how they worked is sparse. Memoirs of KGB defectors like Olev Gordievsky, Yuri Bezmenov, and Stanislav Levchenko confirm that in this period, Western business leaders were frequently the targets of Soviet intelligence. Although the Ministry of Internal Affairs did not typically initiate these operations, these accounts show that it frequently supported or facilitated the KGB's operations by leveraging its domestic authority inside the USSR, particularly in terms of surveillance, entrapment, and visa oversight for foreign visitors. There's a little bit more if you want to know it. Musayev's claims are not the first time that a former senior KGB intelligence officer has publicly claimed that they were aware of Trump's recruitment to the KGB, but it's the first time that Trump's alleged Russian codename, Krasnov, has been identified. According to Oleg Kalugin, a former KGB general who served in foreign intelligence and counterintelligence, and during the Soviet era was Vladimir Putin's direct superior, Trump was on the radar of Soviet and Russian intelligence as early as the 1980s, with claims that the KGB had compromat on him, including reports of his sexual relationships with women. You know, those don't count for anything these days. Yuri Shvets, who exercises a lot in Shvets through his tracksuits, I guess. Another former Soviet spy residing in the U.S. claims that the USSR cultivated Trump since the 70s, supporting his political ambitions and flattering him. According to him, Trump became a target of Soviet and Czechoslovak intelligence in 1977 after marrying Czech model Ivana. You know her as Ivana Trump, buried unceremoniously now at the Trump golf course in Bedminster. Her name prior to marriage, Ivana, Zelnichkova. I don't know. And there's an accent mark. Is she Zelnichkova? Zelnichkova? I don't know. I've never heard her name prior to marriage. I don't know if I've ever seen it in writing either. It doesn't look familiar, but I'm sure there it is. Well, Ivana, Trump's first wife, reportedly worked with the Czechoslovak Security Service surveillance group, the, Statny Bezpochnost. I don't know. You tell me. It's Czechoslovak. Known, I guess, as STB, according to archival materials studied by the Prague-based Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes. It's not how to. It's a look back on their abuses, I'm sure. The Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes, and first reported by Czech television. The STB formerly cooperated with Russia's KGB, Poland's SB, East Germany's Stasi, and other, of course, Soviet bloc intelligence agencies. Czechoslovakia's STB monitored Ivana Trump and her family for decades. Reports tracked her marriages, emigration, and ties to Trump, wiretapping her calls and observing her children's visits, and her father was reportedly pressured to cooperate. Shvets claims that in the early 1980s, Trump entered in business interactions with Soviet immigrant Semyon Kislin allegedly linked to the KGB, and that during Trump's visit in Moscow and Leningrad in 1987, KGB agents encouraged him to enter politics. The White House and Alnur Musayev were both contacted for comment, but I guess provided none. So there you go. Take it for what it's worth. I think the thing to take away from this is it corroborates, or it repeats allegations made elsewhere before, which we've always taken with an appropriate grain of salt. This adds a code name. Yeah, sure, maybe. We'll just see whether it comes up in conversation at any point. And if it does, you'll understand it when it happens. Okay, let's see. Other things to bring you up to speed on. I thought this was an interesting take. We'll add this one to the mix from The Guardian if, in fact, it at any point responds to my clicks. Gee whiz, I guess not. Okay, well, that gives us a chance to try clicking on something else and waking it up. Now we go. Okay, an interesting headline. David Smith's piece in The Guardian offers us: Trump tried to extort Zelensky and was impeached. You remember that. That was the first impeachment, 2019. Now he may succeed. That is interesting, isn't it? Putting it in those terms. Zelensky reportedly on his way to Washington to knuckle under and sign a mineral rights agreement with the United States. The Trump administration, I guess, purportedly having successfully extorted out of them the right to rare earth mineral reserves in Ukraine. In exchange for what? We're not really sure. Trump wanted it to be in exchange for nothing in the future, to pay us back, to pay the United States back for support already given, which is amazing in its own right. Then, of course, couple that with the fact that Trump intends to provide no further support at all anyway. I'm not really sure what Zelensky thinks he's getting out of it, but it might not matter. It might just be he's coming to placate Trump so that the situation doesn't get any worse. But David Smith points out, he has tried to extort Zelensky in the past, got impeached for it, was let off the hook by Republicans like Mitch McConnell, who say they, who tend to indicate that they regret it now, but too late, and who cares? Acquitted on political grounds, of course, but now he may actually also succeed in extorting Zelensky after all. The Ukrainian president, the subheader reads, is expected at the White House on Friday, that's today, to sign a multi-million-dollar minerals deal with echoes of a notorious 2019 phone call. Alexander Vindman remembers the phone call, his brother now in Congress, of course. He remembers the phone call and what he did next. Serving on a National Security Council, he went to see his twin brother, who was the council's senior ethics official, closed the door and told him, Eugene, if what I'm about to tell you ever becomes public, Donald Trump will be impeached. And he was. He just wasn't removed from office because Mitch McConnell is a craven idiot. Vindman had set up a call between Trump and Ukraine's new president, Volodymyr Zelensky, in July of 2019. He heard the U.S. president attempt to leverage U.S. military aid to the country in return for Zelensky launching an investigation into Joe Biden's son Hunter over his position at a Ukrainian gas company. You all know that backstory. Trump was indeed impeached for offering a quid pro quo in the hopes of finding dirt on a political rival, but 6 years on, the incident haunts current negotiations over ending Ukraine's war with Russia. That's Russia's war on Ukraine, really, including a deal for continued U.S. military aid in exchange for access to Ukraine's valuable mineral resources. With Zelensky due to visit the White House on Friday, observers warn that Trump is trying to strong-arm him again. In the course of this one phone call, President Trump implicated himself by saying that Ukraine would have to do him a favor in order to get access to the congressionally appropriated $400 million and a meeting, recalled Vindman, author of a new book, The Folly of Realism, How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. how much that rhymes with what's going on this Friday with President Zelensky coming in and another kind of shakedown for billions of dollars in order to continue to receive support. Vindman was the NSC's Director of European Affairs at the time of the phone call that Trump later described as perfect. After informing his brother, he filed a formal complaint about Trump's corrupt scheme that led to televised hearings and Trump becoming only the third president in history to be impeached by the House of Representatives, although he was subsequently acquitted by the Senate. The news was monumental at the time, but has been somewhat eclipsed in collective memory by Trump's second impeachment, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and Trump's return to the White House last month. Trump's allies and the right-wing media have also worked relentlessly to denigrate both the impeachment and the Russia investigation, in which Ukraine also played a leading role, as hoaxes. The Trump-Zelensky relationship, so cordial in 2019, has soured fast. It wasn't, in fact, cordial at the time. When America's top diplomat met his Russian counterpart in Saudi Arabia last week to discuss an end to the Ukraine war, Ukraine was not even in the room. When Trump claimed that Ukraine was to blame for Russia's invasion, remarks that echoed Kremlin talking points, Zelensky said Trump was trapped in a Russian disinformation bubble. Trump responded furiously, branding Zelensky a dictator for not holding elections during wartime. When swaths of Ukraine are under Russian occupation, its soldiers are on the front lines and the country is under martial law. By the way, captured on video yesterday and circulated by Aaron Rupar, Trump, I think it was Aaron Rupar, was being asked, do you still think Zelensky's a dictator? He's due here tomorrow, right? And Trump says, did I say that? I don't believe I said that. So I don't know whether that's dementia or just straight up gaslighting, but yeah, kind of not really working. Earlier this week, the article continues, in a stunning shift in transatlantic relations, the U.S. split with its European allies by refusing to blame Russia for its invasion of Ukraine in votes on 3 UN resolutions seeking an end to the 3-year war. Under this shadow, Zelensky is due to visit Washington today to sign a deal that, in Trump's framing, and we don't know what it says, what Zelensky thinks it says versus what Trump thinks it says, would give the U.S. access to Ukraine's deposits of so-called rare earth minerals used in aerospace, defense, and nuclear industries as a way of Kyiv paying back for aid already sent for the war effort under Biden. Not usually the way we work things. And of course, as others have pointed out, we're not owed anything for contributing to Ukraine's defense. Normally, that would never be asked anyway, but in this case, there's also, in fact, an existing agreement after the collapse of the Soviet Union in exchange for Ukraine giving up its possession of Soviet-era nuclear weapons and becoming a nuclear-free independent state. The United States said, well, we'll guarantee your safety and sovereignty if you're worried about being retaken by Russia in the post-Soviet era. And you wanted to retain nuclear weapons as a guarantee against that. But the problem with that is, were we really going to see Ukraine launching old Soviet weapons against Russia, the heart of the old Soviet empire? And did we really even want that in the offing? No, we didn't. We preferred that things be denuclearized. But in order to get them to agree to do that, we had to guarantee their safety from Russian invasion. And now under Trump, we haven't bothered to do that. And we're going the other direction and being pro-invasion. Anyway, there are similarities with the first quid pro quo, the article continues, but also differences. Vindman reflected he's not shaking down Ukraine to steal an election this time. There's a national security element. The U.S. needs rare earths for the economy. Ukraine needs investment. So this one actually, in some strange way, even though the scale is magnified, is far more legitimate than the last go-around, even though it does come across as a shakedown and completely anti-American in the way we do business around the world. Zelensky also finds himself in changed and more vulnerable position. He has said more than 46,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and more than 390,000 wounded, but other estimates are far higher. Trump's intemperate rhetoric has hurt morale. Russia is making advances on the battlefield. Max Bergman, director of the Europe, Russia, and Eurasia program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank in Washington, said, Ukraine is far, far more desperate than it was in 2019. We have a country that's being assaulted and pummeled by the Russians every minute, so the stakes could not be higher for Ukraine. The minerals deal was a perfect example of how difficult it is for Ukraine to navigate the situation, added Bergman, a former State Department official. The Ukrainians realized that not signing this deal, which is very hypothetical and wouldn't really even come to fruition, companies aren't going to go excavating until there's an actual peace settlement, wasn't worth fighting over. But it also further demonstrates the lack of interest and commitment that the U.S. has to supporting Ukraine. Trump's first month in the foreign policy stage has come at a head-spinning pace, with plans to take over and redevelop Gaza, buy Greenland from Denmark, or possibly just seize the Panama Canal, and absorb Canada as the 51st state, in case you were counting. But nothing is more contrary to the Republican Party of old than Trump's willingness to side with Russia over Democratic allies. Joel Rubin, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, said, "We don't know yet about any personal benefit per se to the president, but we do know that he's using the threat of withholding military aid and American support for Ukraine in this process as a pressure tactic to extract concessions. That's typically what you do with your adversary. In this case, also, it's not at all clear who would get the money. How does this work? How does this advance America's global standing and our economy?" At a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, Trump hailed the minerals deal as a very big agreement. And on Thursday, at a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he suggested that the presence of American workers extracting critical materials would act as a kind of security backstop that allies are seeking to deter Russia from invading again. I don't think so. But Rubin is skeptical that an economic agreement will necessarily guarantee Ukraine's future security. Who's to say that Russia wouldn't decide that they're going to invade Ukraine, but before that, they're going to call the United States and say, we're going to invade and take over Ukraine, but that minerals deal you have with Ukraine, we'll maintain it, and we'll do it with you. Then they go and invade, and the U.S. says, well, as long as we have our deal, we're okay with it. There's nothing to prevent that. And indeed, that's probably the plan for this whole thing. So, all right. Yeah, no security guarantees whatsoever in that situation. Can we squeeze in one more item before exiting for the week? Oh, I don't know. Probably not, because they're lengthy articles, but certainly not going to get anywhere as long as Pocket is dragging its feet in reloading. And I guess that's going to take us to the end of the show, because it's pondering whether or not it's going to display the things that I've saved there. Okay, here we go. All right, let's throw in one more thing that's actually relatively short. Also, Scott sent it our way. This is interesting, just in terms of, you knew that all of the dodgy efforts and the killing of various programs wasn't going to save us any money. We've got a million stories like that. Here's another one, but one that might be of interest to you, from The Drive. Scott, I guess, reads a lot of automotive publications. This is not the first one that he's sent from that kind of publication. So Trump's EV, electric vehicle, EV rollback could cost taxpayers $1 billion. This is an interesting take on things and a good lesson in how stuff really works. The federal government will lose $225 million just from the depreciation hit of selling 25,000 government-owned EVs, Nico DiMattia tells us. This is actually quite an interesting story. Let's see how much of it I can get in there. It's pretty succinct, I think. Last week, the Trump administration, I missed this one, ordered all electric vehicle chargers at federal buildings to be shut down. That's weird for like the Tesla guy, don't you think? And all federal government EVs to be sold. It's a reversal of course, Biden-era policies that spent $300 million installing those EV chargers and buying those cars. But rather than saving $300 million by canceling it, the new policy reversal would reportedly cost United States taxpayers an additional $1 billion. How so? According to Politico's E&E, one of their expensive specialty publications that the federal government officials used to subscribe to but is now canceled. The U.S. General Services Administration, the GSA, the agency in charge of government real estate, buildings, products, and equipment, is being forced to remove 654 EV charging stations, which totals 2,226 charging ports, and sell more than 25,000 government EVs. A GSA employee who chose not to be named because they're not allowed to speak with the media told E&E that decommissioning those chargers could cost around $50 to $100 million. Furthermore, selling off 25,000 EVs would flood the market, resulting in massive depreciation, and the GSA would be forced to sell them at around 25% of their original value, resulting in an additional $225 million loss. Pretty dumb, although, quite honestly, I'd have to give some consideration to buying a super discounted EV from the government, if that comes to fruition. But the added costs don't stop there. Since 25,000 working vehicles will be missing from the government's fleet, they'll have to be replaced. That's reported to cost another $700 million. If you total all those costs, the new cars, the depreciation hit, the decommissioning of the EV chargers, you're looking at over $1 billion. That's excluding the $300 million already sunk into the charging stations, money that's now being lit on fire since those are going in the trash. Yeah, time to belatedly get out for the day and hand things over to Justice Putnam. But this is rather amazing. Most of those chargers, by the way, are at federal buildings like FBI headquarters, military bases, etc., where they're mostly used by government employees. However, many are available to visitors at other buildings like federal libraries and museums. So it isn't just government EVs that are being affected, but also everyday Americans who'd like to charge their own electric cars while visiting government facilities. So, not only is this costing taxpayers additional money, but it's also making the lives of EV owners just a little bit harder, and they may in fact want that. What's more, this move is said to cost even more in the long run. As pointed out by a couple of industry publications, there are claims that the federal EV fleet was going to cost $6 billion less than a conventional combustion fleet over the lives of the vehicles. While the purchase cost of EV vehicles is higher and the required additional cost of installing chargers is more money, they would have cost less in the long run in fuel and maintenance. Get it? Yeah. And by the way, at the heart of most of those claims about the relative value of electric vehicles versus gas vehicles, almost everything that the value proposition that Elon Musk makes for Tesla is wrapped up in all of that. Is Elon Musk prepared in the service to MAGA to sacrifice everything that he's ever said about the value of the chief source of his income?
To Kagro in the morning.
The answer is probably yes.
David Waldman.
And the answer is yes for whether or not the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is coming up next. Justice Putnam, of course, will be following us with his own collection of stories of the day. Tops on his list today. During his meeting and press conference with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Trump was humiliated by his own ignorance. Oh, I doubt he even knew it, though. Stay tuned to find out how.